Jim and Will. What have they been watching lately? They're husky, hairy, huggable homos. Movie Bears Podcast.
Hello all and welcome to the Movie Bears Podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos and friends to review films either current or classic. And sometimes we do things that are beyond film as well. We pull in a little TV sometimes, which is what's going to be happening tonight. Not only are we coming at you with our mainline review, which is a new film by M. Night Shyamalan, that being Knock at the Cabin, but we're also going to be discussing that third episode of The Last of Us that the internet has just been on fire about. Good, bad, everything in between, so many comments. Definitely looking forward to jumping into that and having some discussion around that episode as well, of course, as Knock at the Cabin. But to talk about these meaty topics, I can't do it by myself. That would be super boring. So let me tell you and introduce you to my co-host. Jim Pugliafco is with us today. How are you doing, sweetheart?
I'm doing okay. Thanks, babe. Yeah, doing okay. We're going to talk about some TV today, which is interesting for us. Sometimes we dabble in a little TV and, we're kind of living in another golden age of TV, I feel. And of course, we have a movie to talk about. So we got lots of stuff.
Yes, indeed. And also to help us dig into it, Will Lindis is here. How are you, Will?
Doing great. Really excited about tonight's episode. We're getting a chance to really focus on not one, but two pieces of media that feature queer storylines, queer relationships in horror or horror adjacent properties that have come out in recent weeks. So it'll be interesting to see not only how we feel about these two pieces of media, but also maybe how they compare and contrast to one another. I love it when something kind of thematically falls into place like this.
Absolutely agree. Well, I think it goes... I was going to say it goes without saying that we were going to spoil The Last of Us Episode 3, but I'll say it anyway, just in case. We are talking about this a week after it aired, so I think probably a lot of people have already seen it, but I also know a lot of people haven't even checked in with The Last of Us yet. They have not begun that series yet. So very important to say up front before we dive into that discussion that if you haven't seen The Last of Us yet, A, I think you're missing out. But B, just be advised, we're going to be talking about everything up through the third episode and the third episode only. So, Will, I know I don't think you've seen the fourth episode yet. We have, but we're just going to be talking about through the end of episode 3. So be advised. And then, of course, we'll get into Knock at the Cabin a little bit later. But Jim, Will, are you guys ready to jump in?
Yeah. Let's do it.
All right. Then here we go. Our discussion of The Last of Us, episode 3, Long, Long Time. All right, so this episode has been taking the internet by storm. I know that's a cliche, but it feels apropos here. This episode, we mentioned spoilers are happening right from the get-go. This episode deals with a gay relationship at the end of the world during the apocalypse. Society has, for the most part, fallen to the infected who have mushrooms growing out of their heads. Society is in shambles. There's groups of people out there who want to kill other people. There's infected who are trying to kill everybody and make more infected. So what do you do when the whole world is falling apart? Maybe, just maybe, you find love. And that's what happens for the characters of Bill and Frank, Bill being played by Nick Offerman and Frank by Murray Bartlett. Anxious to hear your guys' thoughts on this episode, so let's just do it. Let's rip the Band-Aid off and get into it. What did y'all think?
I'll start. I guess I just kind of to set the stage here. I did not play any of the game. I did see bits and pieces of it. I think Brad, as you were playing, so I kind of knew a little bit of the basics of who was in the game, what's going on in the game. I was completely floored by the episode and surprised. Having watched the first two episodes, I'm like, yeah, okay, this is kind of. I mean, it's good. It's well produced. It's certainly a tight series through the first two episodes, and then we get this third episode, which seems like a huge departure, but it's really not. It seems like it is, but it's not. It's not such a departure from the story that we lose the whole reference for why this episode exists. But I just it just kind of it totally shifts the tone, at least for one episode of the show, and I think it's really ballsy of the producers and the showrunner to dive into not just this material. We have a gay relationship that we're exploring, and I'll let one of you guys kind of explain what's going on, but it really centers itself on this queer relationship of these two characters, and in the middle of a zombie apocalypse, and I think that just kind of makes the whole thing really stronger. But I give full credit to the show. It's it's a gut punch of an episode. I think it sets some backstory. It also kind of gives you more of like the human. It isn't just people against zombies, people against. It's like this is a human story, and I loved it for that. So yeah, I mean, I loved it. We'll get into more about the discussion around it. I don't know what else you guys thought about it.
It's interesting. This is a property that I think is very quickly becoming one of the best adaptations of a video game that I've ever seen. And I think that's because what this property is doing so well is it's not just adapting beat for beat the game. It's extrapolating, changing, and it's morphing, and it's telling a story. In the characters of Bill and Frank in the game, Frank, you only, I guess, spoilers for the game, but this is where we're at. You only see like Frank's corpse, and after he's like fled from Bill because they had like a disagreement over things, and I think Bill's final line is something like "fuck you, Frank" or something like that. So there's queer subtext to it, but it's very different. And I think what works so well about this adaptation here, this is a story where the idea of hope and fighting for the people that we love and protecting them is so important. And having an episode that was all about love spanning over a decade in this like dystopian wasteland lets us know kind of what it is that the characters going forward are going to have to fight for, why it even matters that they have hope, or why it even matters that they move forward with what they're doing. As for the relationship as it's displayed here, we have the Nick Offerman character of Bill is a gun nut, a survivalist. He has a bunker and he's got all sorts of shit ready to save himself from the doomsday. You also learn that he's never been with a man, although you can tell that it's something that he's wrestled with for a while. When Murray Bartlett, his character Frank, comes along, just seeking a place to get food in Bill's compound for the night, the two realize that they shared attraction for one another that spans not just the night, but 16 amazing years inside of this wasteland. It's moving. I think that a lot of us in our journey as queer men have been both the Bill and the Frank. And I don't mean that we've been gun nut survivalists or that we've, had to barter for our life in the apocalypse. But I think we've been on different sides of the coming out power exchange, right? We've been the person who was tentative about our own coming out experience. We've in a lot of places been the person who's helped shepherd someone else out, not necessarily via, sex, although sometimes whatever, but sometimes just through conversation or resources. As a queer man, I resonated with that. I resonated with the fact that I saw people that look like me, and have some similar experiences to me showcased on screen. It was also great to see a queer story that, while so many of them get refrigerated, fridged, like the killing of a queer character to further someone else's story. And maybe you can argue that happens here. I think these characters have a full, robust story in and of itself, that is motivated less so by the goal of someone else, but more for their own relationship and love. I love it. This is, I need more, not all queer representation has to end with us like skipping happily through a meadow at the end for it to be a good, positive representation. This is good, positive representation, and I need so much more of this.
Will, you brought up the game, and I don't know when the last time you played the game is or was, but for me, I recently just completed a playthrough of the remake of the first game. I didn't want to spend my own money on a remake of a game that I already had, but a very wonderful person gave me a PlayStation gift card for Christmas, and I was like, hey, gift card, I'm gonna buy The Last of Us remake and play it through again before the series starts. And so I very, very recently played through the Bill and Frank section. It was very fresh on my mind. And going into this episode, I was a little worried, honestly, about how this was going to play out, because as you mentioned in the game, they're estranged. Frank, hangs himself after being bitten a few times by infected because he doesn't want to turn. They are not in love anymore. But not even that as much as in the game, which admittedly was made, 10 years ago. Their relationship really has to be put together through context clues. Bill references Frank as being his partner, quote. But initially, it sounds like he's talking like another survivalist that he's just, broing around with and
Right.
making this community. And it isn't until, Joel finds the suicide note from Frank that you really kind of put everything together and figure out what's going on. The interesting piece of that is so many people on social media who are fans of the game, and I've seen it on Facebook, I've seen it on Twitter, and I've seen it a ton on Reddit. So many people did not apparently put those subtext clues together and realize that Bill and Frank were a couple. Whether because they didn't want to see it, whether because it wasn't strong enough, who knows?
They're
But
too
those
busy
people
fighting off the infected, Brad, to notice really
Yeah,
the
but
real story, right?
yeah, but a lot of those people, took to social media and they're like, oh my God, this crazy relationship, it wasn't in the game. Why are we having this gay shit like shoved down our throats? Why did they
Oh, yeah.
make this crazy change? And I actually kind of saw some amazing things happening in the discourse about this episode. Some of those people were like, I have no problem with gay people, but I don't need to see two men have sex on TV. And I'm like,
Which never
okay.
happened.
But I'm like, first of all, we didn't see them have sex. We just saw them like rubbing their chest a little
Cuddling,
bit in bed
yeah.
together, cuddling with the covers on. And second of all, like, I have lots of straight friends. I'm not afraid of straight people, but do I need to see straight sex on TV all the time? Like, you reverse that argument and it immediately becomes clear, right? Like, what a fucking load of crap.
Where were these
that is.
people? Where were these people during Game of Thrones? Is my thought. Like
Exactly.
I saw so many boobies in that, which I don't know. Again, no problem. But at the same time, like, it is definitely a double
And
standard.
penetrative thrusting.
Yeah.
Yep.
What we really got here was, what we got: intimacy. We got the implication of sex. The camera cut away before it got to anything graphic. It's not, again, people sort of made a mountain out of a molehill here. I will also say, and maybe this is just me dunking on people, but I'll do a little bit of that. If the people who say, why did they make them gay? They weren't gay in the game. I'm going to say those weren't true gamers because they didn't find the copy of Bearskin magazine that was in Bill's place.
It's
They literally have a bear magazine sitting around with like a shirtless, like fuzzy dude on the front of it.
Mm-hmm.
There are likely
not a true gamer.
I'm not a gamer, and I don't want to shit on gamers, but I'd imagine that there are people who play games who basically live for the gameplay, but then kind of go into standby mode during a lot of the cutscene stuff, and don't, you know what I mean, and don't really pay close attention and put those context clues together unless it's where to find the next fucking gun to blow a zombie away. You know what I mean?
All of that is fair, but then when you use that as a kind of no true Scotsman for a game where you don't like the fact that they've included queer themes when they were there all along, feels like it's sort of like picking and choosing. I guess that's more that I'm ragging them for being bad gamers, not because there's anything wrong with being a bad gamer, but more when you use your gamerhood to like bash.
But at least own it if you're a bad gamer. You know what I mean? Like,
I will say
that you are.
I will say, just to kind of complete where I was going with that, in those conversations happening and in those people getting called out for their internal homophobia, I actually saw a lot of straight men coming around on their thoughts and realizing that it is internalized homophobia that was leading them to make the comments that they were. Like, full blown, like 150 responses back and forth. These guys are finally admitting that, like, you know what? I was uncomfortable seeing two gay guys on TV because of things in myself and the way that I grew up. And they kind of came around and appreciated the episode for helping them to kind of like crack that nut open and maybe change a little bit. So I just really want to appreciate, Neil Druckmann and the showrunners and, Nick Offerman and Murray Bartlett for creating this amazing, amazing story that, yes, controversial to the extreme, but like maybe it's helping to get the discourse going in a way we need it to. Seeing two like burly, hirsute, manly men coming together on TV, it's a magical thing.
Well, seeing two, this was a relationship of two people who found one another and needed one another. And I think that through the course of watching this and seeing that it spanned a 16-year period within the context of the show, I think that an audience member might be able to project parts of their own relationship on either the Bill or Frank or both characters in a way that might even be more accessible than when you watch like a rom-com where it's all about like the meet cute, like the trials and tribulations up to the the romantic
which this
kiss
did have a little of that. Yeah,
this did have some of that, but it kept going, and so we got to see like multiple aspects. We got to see attraction, we got to see sexual exploration, we got to see frustrations, we got to see the fear of losing someone, we got to see growing old together, we got to see
the hard part
of
relationships, right?
We got to see all of that through a queer lens. And I think ultimately, like, the people that were going to be shitty about this show were definitely going to be shitty about it either way, right? There's a certain wing of people that just don't like gay people and never will, and but more than anything, I'm seeing a lot more people. Like, my feed is like the most negative I've seen has been positively lukewarm. Like, and beyond that, it's just, I think a lot of people are feeling seen, and a lot of family members are seeing seen. They're watching, queer people are watching this with their straight family members. They're watching this with their relatives because this is a high prestige show on a high prestige network, air quotes prestige, whatever, again, this is why representation matters. And this is why I think we harp as queer people so much about wanting to see, these types of stories told is because each one of them chips away at this brick wall of prejudices and biases that not just people have, but society has kind of forced people to form around them, you know? And so I know we'll always on the show, like celebrate these types of stories. So, gosh, I mean, we don't generally do television shows here, but this was like a no-brainer for us. Not just is it, you know, hot bears doing hot bear thing, but also, I mean, it's genuine queer representation in a way that, you know, I wish every show, every movie would have the guts to do.
Yeah, and we certainly, you know, we certainly support the chipping away, right? I mean, we're and it's going to be quality product like this show. We talked about, I talked about, at least with you, Brad, when I was watching this, I was thinking about like the Black Mirror episode San Junipero, right?
Yep.
Which is another wonderful 1 hour self-contained episode with a queer relationship in it that was just wonderfully done. One of the best hours of TV ever. And this one's right up there with it. Yeah, but we, you know, those things that are like exceptionally well done, like this is, are going to go a long way toward, I think, toward just getting it out there and making people feel less threatened. It's called homophobia for a reason, right?
Yeah.
It is whether people who are that way want to recognize it or not. It's based on fear of what they don't know, right, and what they don't understand. We all have some sort of phobias going on, right? And
Absolutely.
that colors our judgment on things, unfortunately. So,
Well
but yeah,
put.
I mean, yeah, I like to see this one chip away. We have some great comments, by the way, and
Yeah,
one of them,
I was
yeah,
waiting for you
gonna
to
get in?
finish before we
Yeah,
jumped into
let's
those.
jump into some. Yeah.
Yeah. So Ben says it was very refreshing to see an elder queer story. And Ben, not to put words in your mouth, but I think what you're getting at is that these guys were over 40. You know, I think they were like late 50s, maybe early 60s when their Last Supper happened. What did you guys think of going with two elder characters as opposed to like a younger relationship?
Well, twofold. One, um, we'll see where the rest of the series goes from here, but you know, there's plenty of opportunities in The Last of Us for younger queer characters going forward. You know, so I'm glad that we had a chance to tell an older queer story here. But also, I think there is also something really fucking cool about the idea of showing two characters who, based off of their ages, would have, you know, especially the Frank character, survived, like, you know, the AIDS crisis, right? And this, you know, I mean, even using the 80s as like their song of like danger and also song of love, you know, I think there's something really neat about that, you know, about seeing people who have, you know, been through that ringer and now they're through a whole other ringer going through here, but they're still not just like eking out an existence. They're building full, meaningful lives. You know, they are not just surviving in as much as they're thriving. So I love seeing that. And I think that this story would not have told as resonantly at all if this were like two younger characters. Not that, you know, young queer love is not important as well, but this story needed to be told this way for it to make the impact that it did.
Yeah. Yeah, I fully agree, Will. And you know, I mentioned San Junipero earlier, but no spoilers for that. But I'm going to say it's kind of along the same lines, right? This is a relationship that kind of spans a lot of years, I'll just say, and in these characters' lives, and it was great to see that. It is, like you said, it isn't just the young and beautiful folk, I guess. Just that strong relationship, and you know, I'm thinking about it now, and I'm like, I wonder how it was for them, like, to be. It's not like they had a ton of options necessarily, right? Once they were in that relationship, it sure, relationships give you a sense of comfort, but especially this relationship must have given them each of them I even more levels of comfort given what was going on outside of that neighborhood, right? So yeah, that's an interesting wrinkle that I just thought of. But
Yeah.
it was great to see that.
So Volkrov says, seeing that episode made my heart melt. My boyfriend is definitely Bill, and I'm Frank, which got me wondering, Jim, Will, which are you? Are you a Bill or are you a Frank?
Jim, go first.
I'm definitely probably a Bill. Yeah, he was the first guy, right?
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yep.
There?
Yep.
Yeah.
The Nick Offerman character. Yeah.
Yeah, I would have been the one like battening down the hatches and holding down the fort, not out wandering around in a bunch of zombies. That wouldn't have been me.
So I don't know, like it's hard because it's like you have to define kind of what is the Bill and what is the Frank in the relationship, right? You know, is it the which one is the handy one versus which one is the creative one, which obviously both can be both,
Yep.
you know, or is it, you know, which one is the person to sort of help the other one through their coming out experience, or any of those different things. I don't know. I feel like I'm probably more of a Frank, but yeah, I think I'm more of a Frank.
Okay. I could see that in both of you. That makes a lot of sense to me.
All right, Brad, what about you?
Ooh, well, Jim, it's a
Not
good thing
fair
that you're.
if you don't get to answer it too.
It's it's a good thing you're a Bill, because I would say I'm definitely a Frank. I really identified with Frank's optimism and like willingness to trust and like not just surviving, but like wanting to thrive, right? Like dusting the house and fixing up the boutique, and I think I'd definitely want to take on some special projects like that to make life a bit more joyous. So, yeah, I would definitely be a Frank. We also had this episode compared by Daniel Jensen. Hey, Daniel, good to see you.
Hi, Daniel.
To Romeo and Juliet. He says 1 hour they gave us that full Romeo and Juliet epic level love, and
yeah, sort of the especially in as it got closer to the end of their story, right? It felt a lot more like the Romeo and Juliet, end of story. Definitely felt that way. And they they come from, we don't know much about their stories necessarily before they met, their backgrounds and stuff. But, we know that Bill was the kind of the stoic, hunker down type, and Frank was the more of the kind of seemed like more of like a free spirit, either by choice or by necessity. Until they met.
I'm seeing a couple of comments here about, and I think we can maybe share one of these and then backpedal a little bit on some of the others. But Marco says, I haven't cried that much for a show in a long time. And Daniel says, full on ugly cry. And so the question that immediately sparks for me is, Brad, Jim.
Yeah.
How
ugly were the cries? As our friend of the show, Adrian Charlie, would say, was this like a 4-cat cry?
Okay. So picture it, Sicily, 1920. No, okay. I'll tell you the story. So I'm sitting on the couch. Jim is watching to my right. Our roommate and good friend Kevin is sitting to my left. And I'm like watching this thing, and I'm trying to stifle the ugly cry, because for some reason I'm like, I don't want these guys to see me like bawling over this episode. So I'm like full on like choking noises, like trying
We've
to
all
hold
known
it in.
that feeling.
I know. And Kevin is not a crier in movies or TV shows or anything. So I was like, well, I don't want to look stupid. And Jim, I know you cry during things, but you like British cry. You like have a couple little tears, but like stiff face, But I got to the point.
I could still breathe. Yeah.
I got to the point where I was just like, you know what? Fuck it. I don't care anymore. Like, this is so beautiful and this is so heartbreaking. Like, I'm just going to let it out. So I had to take my glasses off because my glasses were getting all splashed with tears, and I'm like wiping them, and my voice is oscillating because I'm so choked up. And
Are you like Blair Witch crying? Just
totally, like, yeah, I totally, snot wasn't coming out of my nose, but like, I could see it happening at some point. So yeah, very, very much a four cat cry.
That's wonderful. That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
but
Yeah.
Brad already told you. For me, it was more like a one cat cry, British cry. Definitely hits you.
Yeah.
I don't know how it couldn't, Kevin, but yeah, it definitely hits you. Maybe, I don't know, maybe because we're, our station in life, where we are, I think maybe affects where this hits us. Those of us who have been, fortunate enough to be in long-term relationships kind of see a little, maybe see maybe the value of that hits harder for us. I don't know.
Oh.
I'm not sure, but I think it hits hard for everybody.
Mhm.
But I think there's certain things that I recognize in this relationship that exists in, at least in our relationship, and probably in many others that we know from our friends. So yeah, a one cat cry for me.
Will, how
That's
many cats for you?
probably one as well, and that's mainly because it takes something like very rare for me to like ugly cry. Just that's how I am for like watching movies or shows or stuff like that. But I think what's so great about media exactly like this, stories like this, is that they're both broad and they're very specific. Like, I think that this story hits a way that it wouldn't hit. It hits for queer people in a way that it wouldn't necessarily hit for straight people, but that doesn't mean that straight people can't look at this and also see aspects of themselves in their relationship in it well. So again, it's general and specific.
Yeah.
For someone who has, lost a spouse, this will hit a very specific way, versus someone who hasn't. For someone who's been in a long-term relationship versus someone who hasn't, all of those things are going to hit differently, and they're going to form a very specific cocktail that's tailored to your emotional trigger points, I guess, and they're going to bounce up and down on those nerves. So yeah, that's where it was for me. I couldn't help but like sort of like think back to my own experiences in my own life, my current relationship, my previous one, and thinking ahead to the future, remembering to the past, just all of those things, all while watching the show play out in, this fungus infested like future.
Yeah, so powerful. I know we have a movie to talk about too, but there's so many comments. We're not going to get to all of them, but I just want to call a couple more
I
out
agree.
here. Scrolling back, Kevin in the chat, not the Kevin we've been talking about, different Kevin. Hello, other Kevin. Kevin says, I almost wanted their story to be told on multiple episodes. And yeah, I agree with your comment, Kevin. It's probably not feasible because the story is, focusing on Joel and Ellie, and this experience with Bill and Frank kind of coloring that in a way. But Nick Offerman and Murray Bartlett have both said that they would totally do a Bill and Frank spinoff. So who knows? Maybe we'll get more Bill and Frank someday. We'll see. Steve Sosa. Hey, Steve. Steve says, from what I've known about y'all in real life, I'd say you're all Franks, and it's not a bad thing.
Maybe.
I think Jim, you do have some elements of Frank to you as well.
I'm
You're
sure
not
I do.
just a Bill.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
No one's
totally.
truly a Bill. No one's truly a Frank. It's really how we embrace our own inner Billness and our own inner Frankness.
It's how we savor the strawberry. You know what I mean?
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Yep. And
Which
then,
is one of my favorite scenes of TV this year.
Yeah.
Just that quiet. I think this was sometimes these shows that are big and action packed and noisy and terrifying are sometimes strongest in their quietest moments, right? And this episode was overall a quiet moment in a very tense show. So and there were some quiet moments within this episode that I thought were just wonderfully done.
Absolutely. And Volkrov, I hope it's okay to share this. You're chatting in public, so I'm assuming that it is. But Volkrov says, this show hits me hard right now since my boyfriend is in the ICU after an incident. I'm waiting for him to get out of surgery right now. I'm watching you guys while I'm in the waiting room, and it helps me relax. Thank you. Volkrov, I don't know what happened, but please know we hope things come out okay. That's such a hard spot to be in, but if we can help even a little bit by doing our thing, we're glad you're here. Please stay with us.
Yes.
We will be with you as long as we can, friend. Okay.
We're giving
I
you
mean,
all the Bill and Frank and Movie Bears podcast energy that we can, that everything turns out okay.
yeah, I can't even imagine, what you're going through right now. But I mean, one, glad that we can at least help, maybe for a bit, take your mind off a
Mhm.
bit. And two,
Yeah.
we as, Brad and Jim have been in a relationship for a while, and me and my partner have been in a relationship for a while too. We've been in that position. We've had our partners, wheeled back into hospital for either routine or for whatever, and it's scary. And but at the
Mhm.
same time, you're with people that love you. So thanks
Mhm.
for being here with us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'm really thankful that we got this episode of The Last of Us. I think we could probably talk for another hour about this episode. Just so many amazing aspects to it. I really want to close this discussion with one more comment from Ben, who says, it was refreshing to see others, especially non-queer folks, having an emotional response to this. Yeah, my social media on Facebook was filled with people, even from high school,
Mhm.
in like a super conservative area, that were like, man, what a beautiful love story this was. Like, I hope I can have that with someone someday. I think it's really cool that queer media can kind of make that jump and be sort of an all-inclusive experience.
And it's I think it's important that this show did it the way that it did too. I mean, this is not the first show that's featured a queer relationship in a dystopian future, nor will it be the last. But I think a lot of times when we see that, especially in like the marquee stuff, like The Walking Dead, I have my issues with The Walking
Yes.
Dead, but it
Right.
did feature queer characters, queer relationships, but those
Mhm.
were very secondary to kind of like the core cast that we had a lot of time to develop before we got them. So even though several of those characters did get a lot of screen time, they always felt a little bit more like secondary characters. While these characters here, Bill and Frank, are only on screen for, I mean, essentially just this one episode, unless something
Yep.
weird happens going forward. Um, because it happened so soon, it doesn't feel secondary. It feels like an integrated, woven part of this story. And so I can't help but appreciate that, and can't help but appreciate the impact that it's having on so many people.
Yep.
Agreed. Agreed. All right. Well, fellas, how do you feel about moving on to our second horror adjacent queer relationship topic for tonight?
From Bill and Frank to Andrew and Eric.
Yeah, I'm very good with it, but I would like to hear maybe some Foley work from Jim as part of the transition. I don't know.
Some what work? Foley
Some
work?
Foley
Oh,
work? Yeah,
yes, I agree. We're ready to go. You ready, guys?
I'm ready. Oh, what is that? What could that be?
I adore you guys. All right. So I'm just going to say this up front before we make the jump into our discussion. We are going to talk about Knock at the Cabin, spoiler free, for probably about 10 minutes. We'll give our initial thoughts. If you're on the fence about seeing this one, maybe that might help you to make a decision. But then we'll give you fair warning before we jump into spoilers, where we'll kind of open things up a lot more so we can talk about the specific plot points. So, all of that said, here we go. Our discussion of Knock at the Cabin. All right, Jim, if you don't mind, very briefly setting this one up for us, spoiler free, of course.
Yes.
Please also add your initial thoughts.
Sure. I'll jump right into Knock at the Cabin, which is M. Night Shyamalan's like 13th or 14th feature film, right? We know M. Night Shyamalan from some of his earlier work, which kind of put him on the map, like Sixth Sense and Signs, and then he kind of in the middle of his output, we had some dips with things like the Last Airbender and The Happening. If you guys remember those two,
Oh, they're
and
seared in my brain.
and then there's some, the last few have been, better. I'll just say that. And we'll talk about this one. I'm going to give you the IMDb non-spoilery summary, I hope. While vacationing, a young girl, and her parents are taken hostage by armed strangers who demand that the family make a choice to avert the apocalypse. So yeah, this one is based on a novel called The Cabin at the End of the World. Is that right, Will? I think that's what it is. I have not read the novel, but I did cheat and read the Wikipedia plot summary of the novel. So we'll get into maybe more of that later in spoilers. But yeah, this one stars Dave Bautista. We all know Dave Bautista, right? Rupert Grint, Jonathan Groff, and Ben Aldrich play the couple at the center here. We went to see this in the theaters, of course, and kind of excited to see this one. The premise looked pretty good to me, not knowing anything about the novel going in. I will say that synopsis I did read of the novel was after I saw the movie. So I ended up liking this one. I mean, I think I have some quibbles with it, and we'll get into that. But I think it's a well done movie. I think one of the things I'll mention right off the top that I loved is I love the tension that it set up in this movie, pretty much almost all the way through. I thought that was its strong point, just the tension and the unease that I think we as audience members feel because we don't really know what's going on or where this movie's going. I think that's where it comes from. But I liked it. I like the performances in it. M. Night here is kind of following the script from the novel for the most part. But we'll get to that. The only thing is, we'll talk about the ending. I kind of wish the ending were different, and maybe we think that for a lot of movies, but I think that would have made me love this movie a little bit more. But yeah, I think it's good. I think it's worth seeing. Is it worth rushing out to theaters for? I would say no. I would say you could probably wait and see this on streaming and get the experience of this movie. But yeah, that's where I am on it. I liked it. It's a like for me.
All right. Awesome. Thanks for weighing in with your thoughts, sweetheart. Quick aside, feel free to edit this out, Jim, but how are you with the idea of canes for dinner? Kevin's asking.
Yeah, do it. Just give me a box.
I'll let him know. Awesome. All right.
No. Get me 6 tenders, nothing else.
6 tenders, nothing else. You got it. Yep. All right. Okay. Kevin's offering to bring dinner home on his way home from work, which aligns with the end of our podcasting. So
what will be hilarious is when I forget to edit this out and it ends up in the final.
Don't edit this. You know what? I'm going to say don't edit this out. We just got done talking about like a real queer relationship, just doing normal ass shit over the course of obviously a fungal apocalypse, and here we're talking about one in a different type of horror story.
Now you're seeing it in practice here. This is what it really is.
Sometimes being in a gay relationship isn't fungal zombies or strange apocalypse vendors, killers at your door. Sometimes it's just figuring out if you're gonna get chicken nuggies for dinner.
Right. I'm not growing you strawberries, but we're getting canes. So yeah.
I love it. All right, awesome.
All right,
Will, how about you? What did you think about Knock at the Cabin?
So Jim, I came into this with a different background in that I got this book when it was so it came out in 2018, the Paul Tremblay novel, Cabin at the End of the World, and I had a flight for a work trip that aligned with when it had just come out, and I saw it on the shelf, and I was like, "Oh yeah, let me get this." So I read it very early on, just to keep myself occupied on a work trip. And I really really loved the book. I think the movie is mostly pretty good. I think I would go as far as to say like the first like 80% of the movie really really hits. The cast is super good. I think the main couple here, Jonathan Groff, who we've seen in like Looking and a lot of different things, and Ben Aldridge, who we saw earlier this last year, I guess. And spoiler alert, they're very good. Standout here is Dave Bautista, who I'm going to go as far as to say I am now very comfortable saying that I think Dave Bautista is the best actor to come out of pro wrestling. He and maybe that maybe sounds like I'm damning with faint praise, but I'm not. I think The Rock is an absolute action hero. John Cena is remarkably funny and does a really good job in comedy, but I feel like Dave Bautista really captured something that fit this character so well, to the point where I Dave Bautista is a mountain of a human being, and he melted into this role to the point where at the end I was like, oh yeah, wait, that was Dave Bautista. Like he was just Leonard. He was just Leonard for me on screen. The tension is very good because once you sort of realize what the stakes are, and we'll talk about those in a moment, the stakes make it to where this isn't like a typical like home invasion-y style story. It turns into something that feels like you haven't seen it before, right? Because of the exact way that it plays out. I didn't like the ending. We'll talk about why. And some of that's just because it's not necessarily that, like, I like the book better, but it's sucks knowing that there is a better ending that exists to what happened here. And I sometimes wonder, like, I know why Shyamalan makes some of the choices that he makes. I know why he makes the choices that he makes here, but sometimes I wish he would just sort of let a thing lie and not feel like he has to like necessarily authorial stamp
I
everything.
can't wait for that discussion with you.
But ultimately, this is a like. This is this is a good Shyamalan film. This is a decent film, all things considered. I think the hardest thing about this film right now, honestly, is that it came out around the same time as episode 3 of The Last of Us. And so it's I can't help but compare the two mentally in my head, and it doesn't stack up favorably in that comparison. But still, it's good. You'll have a good enough time. Just maybe wait for rental.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Will, you mentioned Dave Bautista being like one of the best actors to come out of the wrestling world. It's actually interesting. I mentioned a couple weeks ago I was doing a rewatch of Smallville, and I watched an episode just today that I'd kind of forgotten about. It was actually one of Dave Bautista's first acting roles after WWE. And he plays this crazy criminal who's escaped from the Phantom Zone that Clark has to fight. And oh my God, is his acting like the worst thing I've ever seen in an episode? It's so bad. And he's like doing WWE moves, and I'm sure
but he's in good
probably
company
told him-
on that show, though. He's in good
Well,
company.
Okay. But anyway, it was kind of nice for me to see Dave Bautista, I think at the height of like great Dave Bautista acting, and kind of compare it to like some of his first initial acting. He has come so far. I don't even think of Dave Bautista as like a wrestler anymore. I think of him
Right.
as an actor, which I think is really telling. I mean, I really love him in Guardians of the Galaxy. He's been in some other things that he's been good in, but I really appreciated his performance in this film as Leonard. Even though he's, it's in the trailer, he's kind of an antagonist. I was like, I kind of love Leonard. Is that bad? I don't know. But absolutely great performance. I am a little frustrated with this movie, though. I don't know if it's Last of Us syndrome or San Junipero syndrome, having also watched that recently. But the relationship in this film doesn't feel real and fleshed out to me. It feels like two gay dudes talking at each other, but like I don't like buy them as a couple. And so for me, that took a lot of the wind out of the stakes, I think. And I don't know, like when dangerous things are happening, I'm just kind of like, whatever, I'll eat my popcorn, it's fine. I've never been the biggest fan of M. Night Shyamalan movies to begin with. There have been a couple that I have liked, but I mean, by and large, not as much. I would say that he restrains some of his worst habits here in some ways, but also kind of leans into some of his worst habits too. So, I end up in this like very mixed place. I'd say if you're looking for something to go see in theaters, this is probably fine. There are other things out there you could see too. Fuck, Titanic is coming back this weekend. I mean, you have choices. But I think that overall this film, I think I rated it a 3.5 star on Letterboxd. I didn't hit the little heart button, but
look at
I mean,
us talking about Letterboxd. Look at us.
Oh, the
It makes
Letterboxd
Will
queen.
melt.
Yeah, I'm. Y'all are both the Franks to my Bill in this moment.
Aw. So anyway, there you go. It's a recommend for me, but like not like an over the moon recommend, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think he definitely. I guess we could say he has a certain style, or he's drawn to certain stories. This movie is a huge mystery box, if you ask me, anyway. And he likes to lean into those mystery box movies. We got the movie Old a year ago, 2 years ago, whatever it was, which was again like all this shit is happening. No one knows really why or what's going on. He loves that kind of movie, and if he sticks to landing, I think it works great. If he doesn't, it ends up being kind of silly. This one for me kind of fell in between. Certainly wasn't silly. The ending I wouldn't say was silly or made the movie silly. When we get into spoilers, we'll talk about how each of us thinks maybe where the movie kind of let off the gas a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the thing that's most interesting to me is it's in much more of like an academic way of looking at it. And I don't mean scholarly. I just meaning sort of like divorced from the story itself. This is now a couple of films in a row where instead of M. Night Shyamalan writing his own script, he's adapted something else. Old was a graphic novel. This is the Paul Tremblay novel. So, but he's still definitely keeping his own style, like the types of movies he's choosing, the types of scripts he's choosing. Like if someone told me that this was an original film written by M. Night Shyamalan, and that the book never existed, I would believe it because this feels like a Shyamalan. So it is interesting just to see how even when he's adapting stuff that isn't his work, he's still able to put so much of his own stamp on it. There's something to be said for that. He is definitely a creator with a point of view.
Good, bad, indifferent, whatever. I mean, it is an M. Night movie, right?
Yeah.
So it has that DNA all over it. So I think we can
turn on the black light and you'll see that you'll see it DNA all over the place.
You'll see it splashed all over in twisty little spirals. All right, gentlemen, how do you feel about moving into spoiler territory?
Yeah, let's do it.
It's time to make the choice.
Yeah.
All right. Spoilers for Knock at the Cabin are about to be fair game. This is the part of the show where I ramble awkwardly to give you time. If you're listening live, feel free to go ahead, cut out here. We're not doing plugs at the end of this episode. And then come on back after you've seen the movie and listen, if you care about spoilers. If you are listening to the magic of digital tape delay on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, however you consume your podcast media, feel free to use the time index in the show notes that Jim lovingly creates for you every week
with so much love.
To hit pause and then come on back after you've seen the movie. If you don't fucking care about spoilers or you just want to hang out, feel free to do so. But spoilers are totally happening right now. I typically throw this to you guys to start, but I have a very specific question this week about this film. Do you feel like the marketing gave away the fact that the apocalypse scenario thing was actually happening? That was a real thing.
For the most part, yes, I do. I think there was one bit in the trailer that they could have kept out, and I think it for folks like me, it might have kept me guessing longer, I would say.
Yeah.
Um,
And
but
I
I'll tell you what, even though I did see that, I was still expecting, as I do with a lot of M. Night Shyamalan, I was expecting a big twist in that,
Mm,
what I showed you over here really wasn't what I showed you. It was something else entirely, which we did not get in this movie, I don't think. If you're looking for a big twist, um, it's arguable whether we got a big twist in this movie or not. Other than the fact, that what the four horsemen of the apocalypse were saying was actually true, right?
yeah,
If you consider the obvious a twist, then I guess it's a twist. I don't know. It's weird.
this one veers away from the normal DNA a little bit because the
Mm.
twist isn't necessarily like, the a lot of times it's in a Shyamalan movie, it's the reveal that recontextualizes everything that you've seen up to
That
that
happened
point
before.
that
Yeah.
comes late in the film. Here, I would argue that the Shyamalan twist is actually built into the script's DNA, and you find out about it maybe about, a third of the way or less in, that this home invasion is not going to be with the intention of these four people killing this couple and their child, but instead that they're going to ask them to make the decision to sacrifice one member of their family. And so I think the twist is built into the script.
mm,
Well, I think what I was talking about was at one point in the trailer, you see an actual plane falling out of the sky, right?
Yeah.
In the sky, like not on the TV screen, but
right.
like out of the sky. So at that point, you're like, oh, something outside this cabin really is happening.
Hmm.
Whereas in the movie, until that point of the movie, I was still thinking these people could be delusional. They could be part of a cult. That still, we've seen death cults before, and
Yeah.
I was still thinking, even when those stakes got amped up, like they're committed, but there still could be like a twist that they're in this weird cult and none of the shit is really happening. Um, but yeah, that's not what we got, obviously.
And for me, I can't say that, I'll definitely defer to Jim's answer on whether it was spoiled because, I knew what the outcome was going to be,
Right.
assuming he didn't completely rewrite anything. So it would be unfair for me to say, like, oh, I
Right.
predicted it from the trailer because,
Yeah. Well, we appreciate your honesty, Will.
yeah.
For me, I saw the same moment, Jim, where I forget the character's name. One of the husbands is standing outside on the deck, and the plane is like falling behind him. And so going into this movie, I was just like, well, it's obviously happening for real. So like the tension just, I don't know. I mean, it built certainly, but I didn't believe that like they were just deluded or anything like that. Like I knew it was actually happening.
Yeah.
For me, the tension was like, will the family choose to sacrifice someone or not?
Right. Right.
And that's where things kind of paid off, I guess.
Yeah. So
Mm,
Will, you want to
let's,
talk about the end of the book a little bit? I mean, we can give book
yeah.
spoilers here, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. I'm
How
going
it's
to talk about
different than this one.
well, yeah, like how it differs. And so to do that, I'm going to set up very quickly how the movie ends. So after the four invaders have slowly kind of whittled themselves down, kind of one after the other, saying that each time one of us dies, a plague will be inflicted upon humanity until you make the decision that either one of you or your daughter will be chosen to be sacrificed. After all four of them are dead, it's just the two husbands and the daughter, and the Jonathan Groff character Eric is like, yeah, you know what, I believe this, and the Andrew, the Ben Aldridge character, is like, I don't know, I know, but the evidence is too sincere at this point. They
It's
know that this
gotten
is
to
happening,
them. Yeah.
so they decide to kill Eric. and then after that, the apocalypse is prevented, and all that's left now is Andrew and their adopted daughter Wynn, kind of going off and realizing just everything that had happened. That's how the movie ends. The book, there is a
They
scene
don't save the
where,
world.
well, so there's a scene where Leonard and I believe it's Eric, but one of them is like they're wrestling over the gun, and it goes off and it shoots and kills Wynn and the adopted daughter, and everyone kind of pauses like, oh shit, and then they realize like, well, that didn't count as a sacrifice, right, because it was accidental. So they still have to, one of the two of them, do it. And Sabrina, one of the invaders, she's like, you know what, actually fuck this, I'm not okay with this, like this is too far. She
Your
kills
daughter already
Leonard.
died.
Yeah, she kills Leonard, they and then kills herself, and then the two guys, like they they debate it, but then they decide, you know what, if within the world of the story of the book, if taking our daughter away from us wasn't enough to satisfy God, then we don't, then let the world be damned. And so they sort of drive off together, not sure of what will happen after that. So it's a very different story. It's a darker ending. You don't know
Yeah.
for sure what's going to happen next, but they've lost their daughter and they've said, you know what, the world might as well burn at this point if this is what we were supposed to give up.
So they don't the author doesn't make it clear if the apocalypse actually happens after that.
Yeah, like you kind of are getting, like, you're mostly on the side of like, okay, like it's going to happen because of what you're seeing, but it's not quite as like obvious as it is in the movie. But the characters believe it to different degrees. So you're kind of left to believe that, like, yeah, probably, but we don't know what's going to happen at the next page. But it doesn't matter, because what was important wasn't necessarily that, but it was why they chose to say, fuck it to the world. If this is what the world's going to take from us, then the world doesn't deserve to be here. Whether or not it actually ends or not, that's not as important as what they decided. I think and I like that so much. It's darker. I'm not here like
Not
'cause
as
I wanna see
hopeful.
it.
Certainly
It's
not as hopeful.
And
Yeah.
and Shyamalan has said in interviews, like, he doesn't like to necessarily write horror movies, like with horror endings specifically. What he likes to write is characters, like basically hopeful stories where characters go through something horrific and end on a note of hope. So that's how Shyamalan writes and twists all of his stories. And whatever. I that's not a that's I get it. I get why you'd want to tell stories that way. I feel like it loses its teeth. I feel like
Yeah.
the story doesn't feel like it necessarily. I don't know what I learned about these characters here that other than, like, yeah, that the bad guys were right and they should have just done it from the beginning or something. I don't know. It's just harder for me to feel like, what the point of all this was.
Yeah. I'm with you, Will. I wish that there was a braver choice here for the ending, because I felt it felt like, I don't know, the end just felt not very impactful at all. Sure, we lost one of the main characters. Did we, were we super invested in that character? I'm not sure. It was interesting to see their relationship and how that played out, but I'm not sure I was emotionally attached to either one of those characters, right? So to lose one was interesting, but not impactful for me. And the fact that they were able to, sure enough, they saved it right in the nick of time. So they saved the world and they drive off into a happy sunset. I think it was one of the husbands, right? Andrew, I think, and the daughter, Wen, drive off. And then they learned through stopping at a diner that everything was, all the catastrophes were kind of going away. Yeah. I'm with you there. I think I would have liked to see something more impactful at the end. And when I read the end of the book there, I'm like, wow, that's pretty awesome. If the daughter had died, I don't know, that maybe that's why he didn't do it. Murdering kids on screen is kind of still general audiences aren't going to be too friendly with a movie that kills young kids on screen. I don't think. Plus, also kind of foretelling the end of the world, you know. But yeah, interesting. So that's why I think, you know, I like the movie. It could have been really great, but it let off the gas for me.
Yeah,
How do
I
you feel
think
about
I,
it?
I, I think I totally agree with both of you. I'm trying to envision my experience reading the book if I were to, read it before seeing this movie and then seeing the movie. I think I would have preferred the book's ending too. Normally, I don't like it when things are left ambiguous, but
Yeah.
like, I don't know, that just sounds more powerful than what we got here. It was just kind of like, oh, okay, the husband's dead. They're getting in the car. Everything's fine now. Movie's over. Bye, folks. I don't know. It felt anticlimactic and didn't really resonate much. And I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, and it's not even that, for me, it's not even the fact that they changed something, like let's look back at just our previous segment, right? When we talked about The Last of Us. That's an adaptation where the source material was changed, and I think for the positive, right?
Yeah.
So change to source material can be a great thing. It just has to be purposeful, and it has to, if you're going to adapt something, be true to the things that need to be held true to and make better the things that you can make better and know the difference. And I think that's where we sometimes run into problems with adaptations, right? um I feel like there is a version of Shyamalan's version of this story that could have even been better, right? And I think that at a certain point, um yeah, actually, I'm going to backpedal on something. You know what is going to probably feel like a huge missed opportunity for me is that, um, not to rag too hard on Shyamalan because I do enjoy some of his movies,
Everybody
but
does. Yeah.
if Mike Flanagan had a chance, had a crack at this story, I think it would have been an absolute killer story. I feel like Mike Flanagan would have knocked this one out of the park. And not
Maybe.
specifically him, but I because I think that he's a character who can, as a director, I think that he's able to play into, uh, he's able to let pathos sit a little bit more and not veer away from the fact that like you can have, when I think about like what is it, The Haunting of uh, Hill
Hill House
House.
or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mhm.
that was a story about characters who had genuine bonds and connections and affection and love for one another, but it also went to these really dark and mournful places too. And I think that you could have put some of that personality in here. And again, it doesn't have to be him. I feel like there's probably a better version of this, and the more and more we talk about it, the more and more I'm thinking, yeah, it's
Yeah.
probably like taking Shyamalan out and putting someone else in place to do it. And that
Mm,
sucks to say, but
I know
yeah.
we're getting long. There's one more aspect that at least I'd like to touch on is what did you think of the cat? And I don't know how it was in the book. It just came up. What did you think of the kind of um, the feared homophobia and gay bashing overtones that were in here? I don't think the movie promoted any of that by any means at
yeah.
all. I just think the characters in the movie, there was some flashbacks, right, to some stuff that had happened, and there was, at least one of the characters was a victim of some violent gay violence, and
Yeah.
or anti-gay violence, and you know, what did you think of that wrinkle in terms of like the way that the interactions were written here?
I think I'm still confused as to w- why Ron Weasley ended up as part of this group with this
Seems
family
to
that was
me it was
chosen for the apocalypse when he had that gay bashing encounter with them previously. Like, did he, maybe the book goes into this, I don't know, but did he like choose the family that the four horsemen were going to go to? Like, did he somehow set that in line, or I don't
was
really
it a complete
understand.
coincidence?
So I mean, the movie doesn't spend enough time really going into, I think, the most impactful part of all of this, and that's um there are some scars, not physical scars, maybe physical scars, but like emotional and sort of like trauma scars that specifically the character of Andrew experiences through the book. That's caused some tension. We hear it as a throwaway line here about the whole like you brought the gun, but there's a lot more like kind of them having arguments kind of in the past about like you don't need to have that thing. No, I need it. Like I can't let this happen again. I need to like, and so you get to really feel for why both of those characters were responding the way they were because of some of their past traumas in that particular moment. So as far as like the why was Rupert Grint's character there, it's left pretty open in the book too. But I think because you have more time with the characters, sort of like thinking through it and debating through it and kind of wondering through it, again, it feels more purposeful, right? But I mean, that part's always going to happen in a book to movie adaptation. You're going to have to like trim 15 pages of discussion into like a quick glance or something like that.
It's definitely left a mystery as to how he ended up there and what his previous connection to Andrew, which was violent, had to his connection to Andrew now, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't, the movie never made that clear, or if it was, I totally missed it.
I think what the movie was trying to say is, if these are going to be the four horsemen of the apocalypse, it wanted to choose people with very different personalities to represent the aspects of humanity. So what better to represent like our malice than someone who was an active participant in a hate crime against the people that had to make the choice. I think here's the thing. I think there's something powerful about that. I don't know that it landed as powerful because of how the story was told. So
Right.
I read it as like, and I don't, again, not from the book, but I'm just saying when I look at the kind of the way that my notes from this movie or my recollection of it, it hits as more impactful than it actually was because the film just sort of fumbles a little bit on the execution.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
All right. Well, fellas, great discussion on Knock at the Cabin as usual. Y'all do a great job of kind of breaking things down and looking at the different pieces through the different lenses. May not have been the best movie in the world, but I kind of love that we ended up having this like duality of discussion between The Last of Us and Knock at the Cabin. Some interesting stuff there. So really appreciate you both. Just to give everyone a heads up, next week we're going to be coming at you on Monday, February 13th, the day before Valentine's Day. Normally we record on Tuesdays, but it's Valentine's Day and we have scheduling stuff. So we're going to be coming at you on Monday with a review of Magic Mike's Last Dance. Maybe we'll strip for that episode. We have every other Magic Mike episode.
Yeah, we have.
If the song "Last Dance" is not in that movie, I'm gonna riot.
There you go.
Yes,
there's no way that's not in there, right?
It's got to be. It's absolutely got to be. It has to be.
It's got to be. We'll talk about it on Monday for sure.
Yes, we will. Yes, we will. Let's let people know though. How can they chat with us between now and our review of Magic Mike's Last Dance? Jim, where can people interact with you online?
You can find me on Twitter at JJP Out West. My initials JJP and then Out West. You can find me on Facebook under my name, Jim Puliafco, and you can now find me on Letterboxd under my name, I think, or at JJP Out West. At JJP Out West. I can never remember, but
technically both are correct.
Huh?
You were the only Jim Puliafco that came up when I searched for your name, so technically you're right. Both work.
You could see my latest movie reviews, the ones we talk about on this show, and others.
All right. Thank you so much, sweetheart. Well, how about for you?
So you can find me on Instagram. I'm at whatever cove. I really need to post more on Instagram. I always forget to post photos there, but I'm there. I'm on Facebook. That's where I post the most because, I'm an older gay at this point. I don't know. I'm on Letterboxd. I like to post and review films there. And then still doing a lot on TikTok here and there. It's like I said before, and I'll say again, it's mostly thirst trap stuff or just like weird little memes, but I'm at the Movie Bear there. So follow me on whichever platform makes the most sense for you, or all of them. I don't care.
All right. And you can find me on Facebook. Just look for Brad Harris. I'm the one who likely has Bear, Chub, Chaser, etc. friends in common. Please just shoot a message before you add me so I know you're coming over from the podcast and that you are not a hairy chested presenting bot trying to like get past my filters. Also, you can find me on Twitter and Letterboxd at iBradPro. Thanks for hanging out with us this week, y'all. It was great chatting movies and TV. We had a lot of comments in the live chat. Sorry we didn't get to read them all, but so much love to all of you who wrote in. If you are listening to the show, you didn't get to be part of the live chat. That's okay. We love you too. Feel free to drop us a comment on Twitter or on Facebook. Let us know what you thought of that third episode of Last of Us or Knock at the Cabin. We would love to hear what you thought. Take care, everybody. And again, Volkrov, so much love to you and your partner. Hope everything comes out okay. And we will see you all next time. Take care, folks. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening. I think we're going to love you for a long, long time.
Bye-bye.